welcome back to a brand new episode of Virtual Coffee. My name is Alexa Collier, and on this podcast, we showcase small businesses and the people behind them from around the world. Now with me today is Sarah Spliethoff, the founder and owner of Sunniemade. Sunniemade is a Colorado-based business whose mission is to make the world a little bit brighter, one plastic-free product at a time. They sell plant-powered, plastic-free personal care items such as shampoo bars, lip balms, and bar soap. On this episode, Sarah shares how she started Sunniemade, which, like all successful businesses, started in her kitchen. Since then, they've had plenty of success and have been featured in Real Simple and are even top rated at Urban Outfitters. Within this episode, Sarah also shares her advice for other business owners and her plans for the future. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. You can follow Virtual Coffee on Instagram, Facebook, all the social medias. It's all at Virtual Coffee Podcast. You can also leave us a rating, hopefully 5 stars, on Spotify and Apple Podcast. It really helps others discover the podcast and then discover the businesses that we feature. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and now let's hear from Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks so much for being on Virtual Coffee.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. I'd love for you to just give us a brief intro of who you are, a little bit about your business, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, so I'm Sarah. So I now live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. But when I started my business, I was living in Chicago, and my background's in marketing. So I spent about a little over 10 years in the agency world and worked on a lot of different clients, a lot of different capacities, but really my kind of strength was like strategy and creative. And after doing that for a while, I kind of thought to myself, like, what's my next step? Didn't want to be in the agency world forever. And I had kind of done some soul searching around, like, would I want to go in-house with a brand? And if so, what brand would that be? And it kind of felt like I wasn't finding a lot of purpose in my work. And felt like, well, if I went in-house with a brand, it has to be like a brand that I'm like so excited about and like really loyal to and like really care about their mission. And like, I just couldn't think of what that would be. And I kind of thought, well, maybe I could go in-house with my own brand and kind of start that. And meanwhile, I had been doing kind of a lot of sort of like soul searching around sustainability and like learning a lot more about that and getting a lot more educated about the environment, and had made like a ton of sustainable swaps in my routine. And sort of serendipitously started dating my now husband at that time, and kind of had this epiphany about like bar soap. And he was like using like, I think like Dial or something. And I just like found it so unappealing, like sort of this like acrid smell and like bright orange bar. And you're like, what's in this exactly? But then also realized like, well, wait a minute, this is like basically like a concentrate, and, you don't need plastic bottles. It doesn't have to be all like watered down. So then kind of felt like, well, maybe we should have a product that helps tell the story of like sustainability and like why this is a sustainable swap, and why it would be better than using a liquid product. And I kind of like, as many sort of founders do, like wanted to create a product that I wanted, that I didn't see in the market. So that's kind of what got me started, and then very much like sort of bootstrapped from there. But that was sort of the origin, and kind of felt like, well, I have this marketing background and have the sort of like storytelling skills that I could just use in a different way to market a brand, but also kind of tell that sort of like sustainability story in a way that I wasn't seeing it being told.
I love the stories of how businesses started, because you speak of like that epiphany you just had. How long between having that thought and getting things started? Like, was it pretty immediate, or did you have it in the back of your mind for a while? What was kind of the timeline?
Good question. I was definitely like in the back of my mind for a while, and I sort of talked my husband into like, let's like just make some bar soap at home. Like, let's just like learn it on YouTube, and it'll be like a fun hobby. And then I kind of like marinated on that and like gave some to friends. And then probably like a year or two later, I got more serious about it, kind of aligned with like some shifts that I was seeing like in my career, and kind of felt like, what, now's the right time. And then I just kind of fired on it and like went for it from there.
Wow. That's so cool. And I love how it always starts with like that hobby at home, and then it slowly becomes a business. Did you ever have that moment where you're considering going, making this into something and not moving on from just a hobby? How was that feeling? Was it exciting, scary, mix of both? I'm always interested in that moment when you decide, all right, we're going to do this, we're going to try it.
It wasn't really a moment because I never like it was like a side hustle for a long time. And then it was
Okay.
kind of one of those things where like you just get in deeper and deeper. And then it was like, well,
Mhm.
I'm in too far to like quit now. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden I was like debating quitting my job. But I think I would have never made that leap if I was just like, okay, now I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start making soap and I'm going to sell it. Like
Hmm.
that would be way too scary. And so I think doing sort of like the side hustle kind of like got me in deeper and deeper to where I was like, wait, I'm really invested in this and I'm like really passionate about it. And like, I want to clear up more time to be able to like really grow it. And then kind of like slowly made that leap. So I went from doing it nights and weekends to then kind of convince my employer to let me go like part time. And then that kind
Okay.
of
That's cool.
slid into like more like freelancing. And then so it was nice that I could make that shift over a period of time. Because obviously, as you probably know, like you don't make money right away when you start a
Yeah.
business. So I was able to kind of like hedge and sort of like balance my income in that way.
That's a good reminder. I would say it's actually usually not that immediate decision. Like you said, it's kind of that slow
Mm-hmm.
buildup that you end up maybe looking back and realizing, oh, wow, like look how, like you said, look how far we've come. We might as well keep going. Did you have to make any like major upfront investments for the business? And we don't need to get into the specific numbers, but even for product and whatnot, like what did that look like?
So we're self-funded, and I think in hindsight, I didn't really like do this calculation when I was again just like learning to make soap. But in hindsight, I am actually really glad that I chose this category because it is something that I was able to like kind of slowly get into and not have to, like there's some businesses where you would need to get with a manufacturer and they'd have huge minimum order quantities and there's no other way around it. And like then you're shelling out like tens of thousands of dollars just to get started and not being able to know like how it's going to sell until you do that. But for me, like I remember like putting in my first order for like some just like raw ingredients and like some like, basic kind of like equipment that I needed. And it was like maybe like $200. And I remember being like, this is kind of a lot, but like, I guess I'll just do it. And then in hindsight now, I'm like, I've definitely like had to, you know, put things on my credit card that the total is like far more than that. But at that point I knew like, hey, I'm already selling this product and there's demand for it. So I felt like a lot more confident making those bigger purchases. Whereas early on it was sort of like, okay, I'm gonna roll the dice, like let's see. But luckily I could do that at a very small scale. And we, like I mentioned, started making it at home, which helped us like not have any minimum order quantities or anything like that to worry about. And then from there, once we moved to manufacturers, it was still luckily there are manufacturers for like our product category that can do lower quantities that are like under 1,000. So again, it wasn't like a huge undertaking just to get started.
I'm happy you shared that because I could, even with me in the podcast, sometimes I think, oh, I have to invest so much money up front to get started. And that's not always the case. Maybe for certain businesses, I'm sure there's always
Yeah,
exceptions, but it's a good reminder that you don't have to do it that way. Just
yeah,
because you hear stories of businesses starting and they invested like 20K into it. And that,
yeah,
oh my gosh, that is not feasible for a lot of people. So,
totally.
yeah.
And the other consideration that again didn't think about it, but in hindsight was great quality about this category is our products are really small and inherently
Mhm.
so because we want to have the smaller environmental footprint and everything's concentrated and that's like by design, but you also have to think about storage. So I have like thousands of units of stuff that I'll fit in like a closet, and it's great
Nice. Yeah.
because if we had like bigger products, like you'd have to really think about getting it out of your house very quickly and kind of paying that inventory storage and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's dive into the products. So, can you give our audience, for those who maybe haven't visited your Instagram or your website yet, give us an overview of the products you sell?
Yeah, so we're plant powered and plastic free personal care. So, like I said, it started with bar soap, but we also have shampoo and conditioner bars, which are really kind of our top category. And then we recently launched lip balm, which comes in a paper squeeze tube, very like unique packaging. So, overall, my kind of sort of like philosophy when it comes to products is like we want to provide those products that help you make a sustainable swap in your routine. And really, it's like the essentials, like what are things that you're going to use every day that you need to find something that's more sustainable, but is also affordable and like feels indulgent and really effective. And so that's kind of like where we see sort of our role with consumers.
That's awesome. And what makes your products different? And clearly the sustainability, like you said, the plant-based, but for those of us who need a bit more education in that area, can you dive into the details of that a bit more?
Yeah. So one thing that I was really excited about when kind of like building my brand is coming up with sort of a brand and a product philosophy that feels like very like empowering and positive and exciting around sustainability, because sometimes, psychologically people might think, okay, if this product is more sustainable, then it's going to cost me more. And then I'm going to have to make all these trade-offs. It's not going to work as well. And it's just going to feel very blah. And you see a lot of products out there that do kind of come across that way. They're very sort of like almost like beige washed of like, or they might not feel like they like align with your identity. Like, oh, I'm not crunchy enough to like be using that. But our products are meant to be like very accessible and sort of resonate with like all age groups and all sort of like identities in that way. And I think we have a lot of people that use our products not because they're sustainable, but just because that they like them. So that was kind of like my goal with these products, was to sort of like tell that sustainability story, but like make it very clear, like you're not making a trade-off, and this is like very indulgent. So all of our products have all natural ingredients. We have like no artificial scents. We use a lot of essential oils. And the experience of using them is like very sensorial and feels like sort of this like indulgent self-care experience that is not meant to feel like you're stripping out the fun part from, self-care.
Nice. And yeah, your brand is very, like bright, and I get what you're saying. Like it doesn't look like, I don't know, that earthy like branding, like there's nothing wrong with that, but I get what you're saying.
Like wherever you are in your sustainability journey, like you're welcome with it.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you come up with the formulas? That's always something that interests me too, with folks who start businesses like yourself, of how do you go from, marketing agency and kind of that being your subject of expertise to developing self-care products? Like what was that learning journey like?
Yeah. So, I mean, early on, like I said, we were making products at home, and we experimented a lot. And like when you're, making it yourself, you don't have to worry about the limitations and the process that goes with like working with manufacturer. You can very quickly sort of like be agile and innovate and iterate and all that. So we kind of like honed in our formula just by kind of trying things. And then in our first year in business, one big part of my strategy was I would go to like local markets and like kind of shopping events in Chicago and just talk to a lot of people, and sort of like treated that almost like my sort of like focus group, where I happen to also be selling products, but really sort of like analyze my customers and like observe them, reading the labels, kind of seeing what questions they had for me, kind of seeing what got them to make the sale versus like the times that they like walked away. And that was like a really helpful way for me to sort of like analyze and kind of like narrow in on my different SKUs. So I had like a lot more sense when we first started. And then from there, like after that first year, I was like, okay, these are the best sellers. This is what resonates with people. Here's what they love, and kind of tailored from there.
We love user testing. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And just logistical question, where are you guys able to ship so our audience knows?
Nationwide. We also ship to Canada as well. So yeah.
Perfect.
And we have a Shopify website, so it's super easy to order online, which is, I would say, probably our biggest sales channel.
Awesome. That's perfect. What's your personal favorite product? Is there one that you find yourself gravitating to, or just one that you hold closer to your heart?
Good question. So people like love the shampoo bars. They're like very popular. And I love that one because there's just a lot of great like awareness that we've been able to spread about that. And I still do a lot of like in-person events here in Steamboat. We have a farmer's market every Saturday. So I'm out kind of in the community talking to people every Saturday about products. And that one's just been a fun one for me to educate people on. Obviously, people understand bar soap, but they'll see kind of this sort of like round bar and they'll think it's bar soap and they'll be like, what is this? And I'm like, shampoo bar. They're like, well, what? Because a lot of people have never even heard of it. So it's been fun to just sort of like explain kind of my little elevator pitch with that one is just sort of that liquid products are up to 90% water. So our shampoo and conditioner bars are all the same effective ingredients that you need and are accustomed to in liquid products, but just with no water. So they're basically super concentrated, and the shampoo bars get like very sudsy and they're very effective. Once I started using them, like I was able to go a lot longer between washing my hair, and it's very like easy to brush out, super smooth. Like it really is like an upgrade. It doesn't, again, need to feel like a trade-off. So just like educating people about that product and how it works. And they're like, okay, but how do I apply it? And I'm like, trust me, like you'll get in the shower and be full of lather, like you'll know what to do. But that one's just been fun to kind of like sort of like spread that awareness. And then once we get people, initially like I can be, often met with like some hesitance or skepticism, which is totally normal. But then when people try it, like they come back to me and they're like, oh my God, like I love it. And we have like really strong reorder rates, and people go out of their way to leave like rave reviews. And, I really appreciate that. And that's just been like rewarding to kind of like get them over that hurdle.
Yeah, you're building a community, like not a fan base, but your loyal customers, that's what a good business does, right? It not only sell those products, but build that community. And that's a great selling point of the being able to go longer in between washes for the shampoo bar. That intrigues me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of diving a bit more into the business aspect of it and you kind of launching this business. Any top of mind challenges that you faced? Maybe some challenges or even one that sharing your perspective on it might help other business owners who are listening. Is there anything that stands out of, oh yeah, that was tough, we got through it, but that was a hard barrier?
Oh, hard to choose just one. I think like overall come from a very optimistic place, which I think is what prompted me to take this leap and to like assume these risks and be like confident and like, oh, it's gonna be great. But then, you get the harsh realities of entrepreneurship and just like competition, just how hard it is to get people to move past sort of like apathy or indifference and like really like, make that choice to continue to purchase from you and that sort of thing. So every day feels like, you're pushing a boulder up a hill. But I think the biggest challenge in particular, I think, is just customer acquisition and growth. It started out like friends and family and, then like word of mouth from there. And that was great. But then, that can only go so far before you need like more paid channels to like acquire customers. And definitely have like a bias towards like in-person events, because it really like I think just builds goodwill with people and you get that relationship and they know who they're purchasing from, and that I think has some inherent like loyalty that you get from that. But obviously I'm only one person, I can only be in one place, so that has its limits as well. And then when it comes to like customer acquisition via like paid advertising, like that just gets really expensive. And obviously like I mentioned, we're self-funded, like we don't have like a ton of like investor money to just like blow on stuff like that. So kind of figuring out like what's that sweet spot of growth and making sure that it's sustainable and affordable and all that, while also making sure you're kind of keeping that momentum up, is kind of like I think been the toughest nut to crack.
That resonates. I mean, even with the podcast, like social media alone it is so much harder than people think. Yeah. Just being consistent and posting. And then especially if you're balancing another job or another source of income, super challenging. Yeah. How do you feel about the social media piece? Any tips or tricks there?
Yeah, it is. It's tough. Like there's just so much like clutter. It's a cluttered landscape. And there's just, I think people's attention spans, even since we started, have gotten shorter.
Yeah.
So just figuring out how to kind of like stand out and get people's attention, keep your engagement up, is definitely tough. I think it's just sort of like keep doing it and keep trying things and seeing what works. We actually had our first viral video recently.
Nice.
We're at like almost like 70,000 views on this one video, which I can't pretend to understand like what goes viral and what doesn't, to be honest. This one was like an Olympic themed video, and I think like people just love the Olympics. I don't know, it resonated and just like really took off. But then when I posted it, I didn't think like, oh, this is going to go viral. I had no idea. And then there's other content that I'll post and I'll be like, yeah, this is a really great piece. And then it doesn't really land. So I think it's also just like trying to figure out the algorithm and like how that works. And again, just trying things.
I agree. And with your marketing background, were you creating content with your marketing, like, or did you have to learn how to create?
Yeah. So with my background, I had done like branding and had done some like digital marketing, and a lot of my experience was in live events, which kind of has some relevance to some of the event stuff that I'm doing. But I wasn't in this role exactly. So there's a lot of things that I was kind of like learning as I was doing. I obviously had like the core skills of like understanding like marketing in general and kind of like understanding the storytelling piece of it. But I was definitely sort of like reshaping that skill set a little bit in the context of like running a brand, which I hadn't done that specifically before.
That makes sense. But definitely, obviously, you could pull a lot of your skill sets forward and leverage them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with the Sunniemade name and branding?
Well, like I said, I really liked that sort of like positive,
Mhm.
empowering sort of mindset. And I was just walking down the street. This was when I was living in Chicago, and it was the dead of winter where like sunshine is like very sparse. And it was like a sunny day. And I remember just being like, oh, thank God. And like feeling like there is hope. And just kind of having that moment of like optimism just from the sun being out, and kind of felt like that had this really strong connection to like the earth and sustainability and sort of like, again, that positive mindset. So just sort of like liked that kind of positive name. And then from there, I kind of dealt with some trademarking challenges. Initially, it was called
Mm.
Sunnie, just Sunnie, and kind of ran into some issues getting that trademark. So that's when I added the made. And this was still, I think, early enough on that it wasn't too much of a problem to change it, but liked adding the made because it kind of was sort of like a tip of the hat to sort of that maker origin that we had. And then also just sort of like that it was sort of like earth made, and that we were kind of like using ingredients that were very natural too.
I like the maid. I think it's more intriguing. It's like, ooh, what is that? Like, what does that mean? I think that's a good
Yeah.
addition. And what you're saying about seeing the sun, it reminds me of this TikTok I saw that was like a woman looking at the sunset, being like, forget every bad thing I said today. Like, my life
Yeah.
is great. Nothing is bad. I
Funny.
completely,
Yeah.
I really feel that.
Just like, oh my God, there's hope.
Yeah, exactly. Life is good.
Yeah.
I relate to that. Looking towards the future, what are some of your goals with Sunny Made? Any like future milestones or even just in general where you want to take the business?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a lot of what we've been working on in the last year has been just kind of like scaling and getting our operations really like optimized so that I can spend more of my time on kind of like the sales and marketing and growth piece, and less of my time kind of like fulfilling orders and some of that stuff that ends up kind of being a time suck. So continuing to kind of get like operation support so that we can scale faster, and then looking at like new channels. Like Amazon now has options for like plastic free packaging. So that was kind of like a limiter for us. We're totally plastic free, can't have plastic in, our shipping boxes or anything like that. So interested in kind of expanding into that channel. And then really also focusing on like wholesale. So we have like a pretty healthy sort of like wholesale side of the business already, and want to continue to scale that into like bigger shops. So right now it's like a lot of like independent like gift shops or zero waste shops, that sort of thing, and want to look at bigger retailers and kind of seeing how we can grow with them as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't think about if you're doing plastic free and focusing on sustainability, the challenge that comes with when wanting to partner with like larger
Mm-hmm.
stores and whatnot. That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's really about like for us, like making it as easy as possible to find and buy our product. So, people will buy at events and they'll reorder online, but that coming to our website is not always where everyone, people are doing their shopping. So
Right.
making it super frictionless to either find us in a bigger store that's convenient to them, or finding us elsewhere online where they're already doing their shopping too.
I know we look to the future, but now looking back, what have been some of your
Mm-hmm.
biggest wins with Sunny Made? Any standouts that you're like, that was such a great moment. That was a highlight.
It's hard to pick just one. I think overall, a win for me is just like I love learning and I love trying new things and just like really getting my hands dirty, and kind of have this sort of like jack of all trades mindset of like I can do anything, which I can't, and I've learned that. But kind of like knowing what I can and can't do, and taking things that are like kind of within my skill set as an opportunity to learn and grow. And so my brand has been very much like bootstrapped from the ground up.
Mhm.
So like everything you see on our website, I did all the packaging design. I'm not a
Wow.
designer by any means, but I taught myself Illustrator, just kind of like did it. And like I definitely can take longer, and it takes more rounds to get it to a good place. Like my first versions were not good.
Mhm.
But it's been very fun for me to just like learn and kind of like just get that new experience, which is kind of something I'm always craving.
That's awesome. And that will, I think, give you more success in the future because even if, you grow and are able to hire employees or folks to take on some of those tasks, you still did it and you know what it's like. You
Mm,
can have empathy for
totally.
those employees and just understand their experience. And yeah, I think it's the harder path, but I think it's the better
Yeah.
path.
Thanks. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of touched upon this as we talked throughout this episode, but any advice you have for others wanting to start a small business or just getting started, or someone who's like, this seems really overwhelming. Any advice for folks like that?
Yeah, I would say just start. I think sometimes you can feel so overwhelmed by like uncertainty or, not knowing what to expect or how to prepare for the future. And I remember thinking like, oh, I should write a business plan and being like, I don't know what I would put in it. Like, I don't know what I don't know. And just kind of becoming comfortable with that and just kind of taking that next step. And everything is just, for me, has always been like a lot of baby steps that lead to a lot of progress. But in the moment, you're just sort of like, it can be easy to feel like paralyzed of like, I just don't know what to do. And it's just sort of like, well, just take a step and see where that leads you. And it's a lot of like taking risks and putting yourself out there and being prepared to fail, because a lot of times you're going to make the wrong choice because you don't know what you're doing. But just kind of like taking that step forward to then you'll always have more information there than you did, where you were standing before. And I myself am a bit of a perfectionist, and like as an entrepreneur, you just don't have very much time. Like you're kind of stretched thin, you're trying to get a lot done, and you're kind of pulled in a lot of different directions. So just trying to prioritize and remember that like you can always, just put it out there and then edit and improve from there and continuously. Like I never look at something like, okay, this is complete now. Like it's like, okay, that's V1. And then now that it's out there, I'm going to learn a lot and I'm going to improve the next round. But just getting it out there so that you can start that learning process.
Yeah, I like your emphasis on baby steps, because I think with social media and I don't know, it's easy to think about what you should be doing. Like, oh, I know all these things that I should be doing to be successful, but it's so hard. It's so hard to do all of it perfectly. So it's like taking a step back and just starting, like you said, and just taking those baby steps and improving, evolving as you go along. It's a good reminder because it can get so overwhelming so fast.
Yeah. And just know that you're going to fail sometimes. And as long as you're learning from that failure, it's still progress.
For sure. No, that's great advice. Awesome. Well, last question, and you kind of answered this when I asked you your wins of the business, but let's just going to ask it in case it's different. But in this moment, what is your proudest accomplishment? And it can be related to Sunniemade, or maybe it's something completely different. Just kind of that first thing that comes to mind, your proudest accomplishment so far.
Well, I think you learn a lot about yourself through this process and kind of who you are as a person, like what your strengths are, what your faults are. And, I've learned about some of my faults, but we won't go into those. But I think a strength of mine that I've sort of uncovered through this journey is like, man, I am just not a quitter. And I think like every time I kind of hit a wall where I'm like, should I have done this? This is so hard. And like, will it pay off? And, where is this headed? And like, will I get to that next level? Every time I have one of those moments, I just kind of keep going. And then lo and behold, then next week I have like a huge win or a big milestone or like something comes through that I'm like, yes. And if I had quit last week, then I wouldn't have gotten here. And like, I think just like having that sort of like resilience and sort of persistence is a really good quality in an entrepreneur. And you have to just be tough and be sort of prepared to face rejection. And, you might send cold emails and don't get responses. And you just have to sort of like let it roll off your shoulders, because there's always going to be those moments where you're like, should I quit? And if you quit, you're never going to get to the moments where you do get to celebrate that big win. So my mom always jokes that I was like a stubborn toddler and I was like a huge pain in the butt. But those is sort of like that stubborn sort of mindset, I think ended up being a quality in the end, because I'm too stubborn to give up.
That's a really good learning to kind of uncover that in yourself. And congratulations on all the other accomplishments you've seen so far with Sunniemade and will in the future. And again, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Before we sign off, Sarah, where can people find you and Sunniemade, your website, social medias? Shout them all out.
Yeah, so we're Sunniemade, SUNNIEMADE.com. So that's our website. And then Instagram handle is the same. So at Sunniemade would be probably the best places to look for us.
Perfect. Well, I hope everyone checks out Sarah and Sunniemade. And again, thanks so much for being on, Sarah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.